Good morning to you on this first day of the conference. It's an honor and a pleasure to speak before such a learned audience of Mark Twain scholars. The theme of the conference is change, and that came from a speech that Twain gave on consistency, where he suggested that consistency held back change. So this morning I'm going to give you an inconsistent look at the life of Clemens. First, I want to thank some people who have made it possible for me to be here today. Trip Library staff members Katie Galvin and Laura Kane, who have been conscientious in their help searching for and copying files for me after they received some initial guidance from Mark Woodhouse, Archivist Emeritus of the Center. Also want to thank two former directors of the Center, Barbara Snedekard, who is the Livy expert and shared with me some of her files on Livy, and Gretchen Charlow, who gave me enthusiastic encouragement for my endeavors with Jean. Also thank you to Mallory Howard for information she found for me at the Twain Museum in Hartford. Bob Slada, who is a Twain historian and fellow Ohioan, for adding fuel to the fire, he's good at that, of my early interest in Twain. And Holger Kirsten, who gave me a bit of an audio file, which you'll hear later, because he couldn't be here himself. He's at another session. About 20 years ago, a colleague of many of you, the late Michael Kiskis, professor here at Elmira College, began a talk at Quarry Farm by saying, "I'm going to start with me." And of course that was tongue-in-cheek because everybody knew him, but I'm going to borrow his line because I'm a complete unknown, so I'm going to start with me. About 4 years ago, I was helping out in a middle school language arts class, and the 7th graders were reading Tom Sawyer. Now, I hadn't read Tom Sawyer since I was their age, nor Huckleberry Finn, and so I thought I'd better brush up a little bit on Twain and Tom Sawyer. So I started reading about Twain's life and career, and up until then I'd only read those two books I mentioned, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I was probably aware of one other title, Connecticut Yankee. Other than that, I really didn't know much. And of course, this is all elementary to you, but I was amazed to find out that in the last 20 years of his life, he was arguably the most famous man in the world, and that he had written at least a dozen more books than those I mentioned. Incidentally, my favorite was his favorite, Joan of Arc. Now, I bet all of you, how do I click this in the middle, Joe?
Just press it forward.
Forward. There we go. I bet all of you in your Twain studies sometime have had an oh my gosh moment. Well, this is about mine. About 15 miles south of where I live is the town of Norwalk, Ohio. Have driven through there for many years, and on one corner is a Chinese restaurant. And oh my gosh, I found out that Twain had spoken there in 1869. Well, of course, he didn't speak in the Chinese restaurant because that wasn't there at the time. But this was the building, and he spoke on the 3rd floor that comprised a community room. Okay, well, there was a 3rd floor in this building back then, but it got torn down later because of some storm damage. But you get the idea of how I was this close to Twain. My my wife and I have always had animals, dogs and cats, horses, and even at one time a donkey. And yeah, that's supposed to be like, as I studied the Twain family, it seems most of the references to animals included Jean. So dogs, Jean, cats, of course, but mostly with Twain, but her as well. The donkey at Quarry Farm, Jean, and most of all, horses, definitely Jean, for her entire lifetime. So now my attention was on Jean. And as I read more about her, I found out that she was charming. There's an example of when she went to scout for a summer home in Dublin, New Hampshire, the family that she stayed with, Mrs. Thayer, who was a friend of Twain's from the cruise, she later wrote, "Thank you for sending your daughter. We wish we could have kept her." She was sensitive and caring. She was the one in the family who cried the most when certain people died. George Griffin, their butler, Theodore Crane, and Ned Bunce, a friend of the family. The rest of the family was sad. She cried. She was intellectually brilliant, as Twain later said and realized. She was an avid reader like her father. As an 11-year-old, when they were traveling in Europe, she read all of Sir Walter Scott's Waverley novels in about 5 weeks, all 7 of those novels. She spoke German, Italian, and French, not just fluently, but as her father said, with all the facial expressions and gestures that would be a native speaker of those languages. She was athletic. She skied, ice skated, and sledded in the wintertime. She played tennis and squash. She hiked in the mountains. And of course, she was an accomplished horsewoman. And she suffered from epilepsy. But it seems like all the biographers and writers about Twain, but bear in mind, it was about Twain, it wasn't supposed to be about her, but just the same, completely different view of Jean. And a university website dedicated to Twain said, Jean was the invalid of the family. And here's another one. After contracting scarlet fever at age 2, she remained in delicate health. After she had epilepsy, Jean slipped deeper and deeper into the horrors of her epilepsy. Now, and another one. After her mother's death, Jean's difficulties with seizures became more severe. They did, but not necessarily because of the death of her mother. And she was institutionalized, a word I don't like for her either, for most of the next 5 years. So let's go back to the beginning for a broader look at Jean's life. A week ago Tuesday was her birthday, July 26th. She was born at Quarry Farm in 1980. And there's some interesting family dynamics at play, I think. I have grandchildren with the same age spacing as the Clemens girls. Now, Twain was already 44 when Jean was born. Clara was already 6, and Susie was 8. So I know from my experience with this newborn coming 6 years after the last one, that the new child is the novelty, gets all of the attention. And so it was with Jean. Twain gushed in letters that he wrote about her birth to his mother and his sister and various friends. So this continued through her childhood. This is showing Jean about animals. I missed that one. That was a picture taken in Austria when she was 18. The day before she put her hair up, sign that she was then a lady. So there's Jean at 4. I don't know if you can see the look in her eyes there, but kind of impish, maybe. I want to read you a story that maybe you've heard before, but it's a delightful story, so you won't mind hearing it again. When Twain wrote about an incident with Jean when she was 4 at Quarry Farm. Joe, how do I do that audio there? Because that'll be coming up. Yesterday evening, our cows, after being inspected and worshipped by Jean from the shed for an hour, wandered off down into the pasture and left her bereft. I thought I was going to get her back home now, but that was an error. Jean knew of some more cows in the field somewhere and took my hand and led me towards them. When we turned the corner and took the right-hand road, I saw that we should be presently out of range of call and sight. So I began to argue against continuing the expedition, and Jean began to argue in favor of it. She using English for light skirmishing and German for business. I kept my end with vigor and demolished her arguments in detail, one after the other, till I judged I had her about cornered. She hesitated a moment and then answered up sharply.
Wir werden nichts mehr darüber sprechen.
Want to hear it again?
Yes, let's hear it again.
Oh, well.
Okay.
It's German.
It's true. That's the audio that Holger provided to me. I was hoping he could be here and come up and speak that in the voice of a 4-year-old girl, which he thought would be really funny, but he's at another session at the moment. So anyhow, she said sharply that, which translates into, we won't talk anymore about it. Twain said it nearly took my breath away, though I thought I might possibly have misunderstood. So he said, you little rascal, that sure looked like her. What was that you said? Yeah, but she said the same words over again and in the same decided way. I suppose I ought to have been outraged, but I wasn't. I was charmed. And I suppose I ought to have spanked her, but I didn't. I fraternized with the enemy and went on and spent a half an hour with the cows. So Twain always remembered Jean, maybe first and foremost when he was traveling. Once he was on sailing on business when she was almost 13, and he wrote about a painting that he had seen on the ship, which showed a child sitting facing a rabbit almost as big as her, rabbit standing on his back hind legs, and the rabbit had never seen a child, and the child had never seen a rabbit, and the child was afraid of the rabbit. Then, again, when she was 13, family was in Paris, and I want to give you an idea about how Livy thought of Jean at that time. Parts of a letter that she wrote to Twain said, Jean the beloved is off this morning for school. And she goes on about starting school in Paris. She says again later, she is the dearest, sweetest, helpfulest child in the world. And then talks about choosing the boniest horses for choosing taxi drivers. But then again, ends up the letter with, she is as cheerful and sunny as the day is long and an increasing comfort. But only a few months later, Jean started to have lapses of attention like that. or as they found out later, absent seizures, which was the beginning of her epilepsy. But at the time, her parents, they didn't realize that. They only thought she was being obstinate and willful. It's a little 14 or 13, 14-year-old girl. They can be like that. There was another time with somebody else's view when she was 10 years old. I got past that somehow. When they stayed in a writer's colony in Elmira, New York, in the Catskills, and Brander Matthews, one of the authors there, spoke of how Jean rode on horseback, a pony, went barefoot, and was in wonderful health and happiness, and that she was a favorite of the colony. As you know, Livy died in 1904, shortly after she gave this horse to, or bought this horse in Italy for Jean. This is the same horse that later, when the family came back to the United States, I should say, Twain and Clara and Jean, and stayed at a farm of a friend, the Gilder farm in Massachusetts. This is the same horse that Jean had the accident with the trolley car. She was riding one night with some friends. This horse, the details are a little sketchy, but this horse somehow spooked and either ran into the train or ran into the path of the train. Jean was knocked off, or somehow got off, I'm not sure. She rides side saddle here, and I always thought that riding side saddle was just, putting a couple of legs on one side of a regular saddle. But no, a side saddle only has a stirrup on the left side, and then on the left top has a leather hook that you would put your right leg into. So very hard to dismount, I would think. But somehow, she got knocked off. The horse got dragged about 50 feet down the tracks and killed. Jean suffered a badly sprained or maybe torn tendons in her ankle. I think symbolic, that didn't stop her from riding. Oh, this is at the Gilder farm after she had the accident. You see she's on crutches, and yet her dog, Prosper, the St. Bernard, is tugging at her sleeve, trying to say, "Come and play." And she wasn't quite up to it at the time, not running at least. Incidentally, when I first saw this dog, I thought, that doesn't look like a St. Bernard to me. St. Bernards are big, fluffy dogs. But then I found out with a little further study that there was a smooth-haired St. Bernard, which Prosper was one of.
We're moving along now pretty well.
Are we?
Are we?
Okay, I'll try. I'll skip through some things. Unfortunately, I could speak up here for probably a couple hours.
Everyone would.
Yeah, everyone could. Yeah, I understand that. Okay, so let's skip through her time of treatment in Katona, New York. The treatment consisting of only a change of diet and supposedly not being excited, staying calm. Well, while she was there, for instance, in the wintertime, she skied. She was going down the steep hill back of the treatment center one day and hit a mogul and went flying on her face and skidded about 20 feet on her face. She also played what she called violent matches of squash with the men that were there. Again, athletic, not, as the other biographers had said, delicate in any matter, or an invalid, far from it. Okay, so let's take Jean on from there to finally getting back together with her father at Stormfield. And now that she was back with him, Twain, who had kind of ignored her when they were together, again, after her epilepsy started. I don't think he quite knew how to handle it. But now she was back with him, and he finally realized her qualities. In a letter to daughter Clara in Europe, he listed them in a string that he was only capable of writing, a string of adjectives. She's a surprise and a wonder. She has plenty of wisdom, judgment, penetration, practical good sense, like her mother, and character, courage, definiteness, decision, also goodness, a humane spirit, clarity, kindliness, pity, industry, perseverance, intelligence, a clean mind, a clean soul, dignity, honesty, truthfulness, high ideals, loyalty, and faithfulness to duty. And Twain had written years before about red-headed Jane Clemens, that she was warm, spontaneous, impulsive. She was a noted writer and loved dancing. That was his mother. And somehow he didn't realize that Jane was like his mother. Oh, Tom.
Yeah.
That's all?
I think probably it's time to let Alan have some time now.
Okay.
And then we have, after that, some discussion. Thank you.